in a struggle as old as time. There are two religions, destined for a conflict. This conflict will be unlike anything ever seen. What will happen? Discover the Bible Prophecy. Islam and Christianity, a Bible Prophecy Seminar by Tim Rosenberg.
Tonight we are on Presentation 5 of our Islam and Christianity and Bible Prophecy Seminar, the role of Islam in the growing conflict. We're going to get right in to Daniel 11 verses 40 to 43, where it describes the third and final conflict between Islam and Christianity. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and many ships. He shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. Again, note, it's a very rapid conflict. The Crusades and the Ottoman conflicts both took centuries. This one will be relatively fast. Of course, nobody knows how long a prophetic whirlwind really is, but it's going to be shorter than the last ones. He shall also enter the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape from his hand, Edom, Moab, and the prominent people of Ammon. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall have power over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt. Also the Libyans and Ethiopians shall follow at his heels. Edom, Moab, and Ammon are western Jordan. Egypt, you know where that is. Libya, that's North Africa. Ethiopia, that's just down below Egypt. What do we know about all those countries? They're all in the Islamic part of the world. And so, when the king of the south goes down in Daniel 11, he names names of countries that are Islamic in nature. And so the context is exceedingly clear that we really are talking about Islam here. Well, let's take a look at our map, and we have the Roman Empire breaking Christian north, Islamic south. Now, the Roman Empire, by the time Muhammad came on the scene, was largely Christian. But he comes on the scene as far as having his visions or coming to his conclusions in 612. And by 634, Muhammad is dead, but we have 4 Muslim armies in 634 that come up side by side from Medina. And they go up, one of them to the west of Jerusalem, 3 of them to the east. They just bypass Jerusalem, leave the Byzantine Christian soldiers there, and they continue. They go up north and they conquer the area of Syria over on into Iraq. Then they come back down in 637. The Byzantine Christian soldiers are still holding Jerusalem. But now there is no one to help them. The whole area has been cleaned out. Muslims control it, and they know there's no help coming. And they know they have better odds surrendering than if they don't surrender. And so they make a deal to surrender. But they will only surrender to Omar, who is the caliph, the head of the caliphate. You see, a caliphate is a Muslim who controls Islam both spiritually and militarily or politically. It's kind of like the Pope had church and state power, king of the north, church and state, king of the south, mosque and state. And you have the religious, geopolitical tied together. And remember, that's exactly what Daniel 11 is doing, is tying them together, so this fits very well. So as these guys are agreeing to surrender, they will only agree to surrender to Omar. But there's a general there, Khalid, who says, they don't know Omar, and I look a little like him. Let me pretend to be Omar, and we can get this over faster. And so they pretend that he's Omar, but somebody on the walls inside realizes it's a trick, and they say, no, only to Omar. And so Omar has to come up from Medina. Now get this. The armies came from which direction originally? The south. They went up north. Now they came back to conquer Jerusalem from the north. But the king of the south comes from Medina, which is directly to the south, and Jerusalem falls. So because of the little twist on the walls, and they caught that it was a counterfeit, it falls to the king of the south from the south. And God's word holds all the way through. It's amazing when I find the details of this stuff. I didn't used to know that kind of thing. But I keep learning new stuff as we travel along in my studies on Daniel 11. Now, if you take a look at the screen again, you see that area in red. That's the area that Muslims claim to be majority Muslim countries. Not every country there would agree on it. I know I've been in Nigeria, and they would not agree that it's majority Muslim. But you see the area in yellow. That is the area that was Christian world. And then you see Turkey. It's striped. It's politically aligned with NATO, the Christian nations. It's politically aligned with NATO. It's spiritually aligned with Islam. It's kind of schizophrenic between the geopolitical and the spiritual. Makes for some interesting situations over the last several years. But after 14 centuries of conflict between Islam and Christianity, Islam is still predominantly south, Christianity is still predominantly north. And Daniel continues to be accurate. There's a man by the name of Charles Malik. Back in the 1970s, for 1 year, late 70s, he was president of the United Nations General Assembly. He was an ambassador from Lebanon to the United States, and he was a guest lecturer at Harvard. He was born an Orthodox Christian. Here's what he says. The only hope for the Western world lies in an alliance between the Roman Catholic Church, which is the most commonly influential, controlling, unifying element in Europe, and the Eastern Orthodox Church. Rome must unite with Eastern Orthodoxy because the Eastern Orthodox Church controls the Western Middle East. And if they don't solidify that control, Islam will march across Europe. Islam is political. The only hope for the Western world lies then in a united Europe under the control of the Pope. He's an Orthodox Christian, and he throws the Orthodox Church under the bus on this one. Why? Because back during the Ottoman Empire, when the Turks were on the loose, Rome let the Orthodox Church take a pounding because they were having a feud. Then, once Constantinople falls and the Turks keep coming, now they have to put together their own defenses, and that was the Holy League. This time around, he says, let's unite earlier, and he sees that the world should unite under the Pope. He's not done. Take a look at the rest of it. And then all Protestant Christians around the globe must come into submission to the Pope, so we'll have a unified Christian world. And what is the reason he thinks Protestants, Orthodox, and all the rest should come under the power of the Pope? Because Islam is on the march. It's geopolitical and religious. Same thing Daniel 11's indicating, only he was just taking a look at it in history as it was developing in the 1970s. Now I want you to notice some similarities between the king of the north and the king of the south. If you were to be dropped off at one of the poles and not told which, you'd just know you were in a really cold place, right? We have a North Pole and a South Pole. They're polar opposites, but they're both white and they're both cold. So the king of the north and the king of the south don't have to be really that much different. They could be a lot alike and still be opposites. Well, the Bible tells us that there's going to be persecution, right? And there has been. Well, the king of the north, and in the Inquisition, the Crusades, stuff like that, papal-led Christianity, let's see, they killed Muslims, Jews, and Christians who differed with them. During the same time period, the Muslims killed Christians, Jews, and Muslims who differed with them. Sounds pretty similar to me. There are others. There are time prophecies for both. We have the 1260-year time prophecy for papal-led Christianity. But in Revelation 9, we have a prophecy in 9 verse 5 that there would be 5 months, a day for a year. That's 150 years. And that's Arab Islam in its expansion phase. Then in verses 15, we have 391 years and 15-day prophecy in day for a year patterns. A guy by the name of Josiah Litch, back in 1839 predicted that the Ottoman Empire would fall in 1840. Early 1840 said that would actually be on August 11, 1840. And on August 11, 1840, in events that happened in Turkey, Lebanon, and Egypt, the Ottoman Empire became a protectorate of the European empires. And in prophetic sense, once you become a protectorate or controlled by somebody else, you've come to your end, even though they didn't pass out of existence as a group until the end of World War I. But they became subservient on August 11, 1840, just as the prophecy indicated. Now, I'm not alone in this one. What we're looking at is the fifth and sixth trumpet and the three woes in Revelation 9. In the back of my book, there's a chart that from 1100 through the 1930s, over 80 different commentators that talk about these three woes as Islam and Christianity in conflict. The Crusades, the Ottomans. And so this is not new to me. And there's a lot of historical understanding behind that. One woe is past, it says in Revelation 9 here. Behold, still two more woes are coming after these things. Let's try your math out. One woe plus two woes equals three woes. And in Daniel 11, how many conflicts are there? Three. Three conflicts between North and South, Islam and Christianity. Three woes, Islam and Christianity in Revelation. The Bible is consistent. Now the Arab phase, for the first 150 years, this area in red is the area that they conquered. And then they moved the caliphate capital from Mecca and Medina up over to Baghdad, and then they began the decline. And that's when the Crusades hit. Then we have the Ottoman phase. And in the Ottoman phase, they push up, the Turks convert to Islam, push up, take Constantinople, and go up into Europe. And there's a very interesting prophecy in Daniel 11, verse 29 and 30. It says, the king of the north will return and go towards the south, but it would not be like the former or the latter because of ships from Kittim or Cyprus. It's a description of the Battle of Lepanto. And it's the Venetian-Ottoman War. And what happens is the Turks send a fleet out of around 200 ships, and they go over the Cyprus, and they drop off 15,000 soldiers. And then they head west, because the Holy League has put together a fleet of around 300 ships. And so you have 500 ships sailing towards each other. And when they hit, it was a massive conflict. You see, the Holy League was going to go down, retake Cyprus, and then from there they're going to go to Jerusalem. Except it says they're going to be stopped by these ships from Cyprus. And when these fleets hit, it totally decimates the Muslim fleet. The Christian fleet is so badly damaged they cannot continue the Cyprus. They have to turn around and go back home. And they never get to Israel or Jerusalem. And why didn't they? Because of ships from Cyprus, just like the prophecy said. Battle of Lepanto. And why did God allow these Muslim invasions against the Christian world? Well, it says clearly in Revelation 9, verse 20, but the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands, that they should not worship demons and idols of gold, silver, brass, stone, and wood, which can neither see nor hear nor walk. And they did not repent of their murders or their sorceries or their sexual immorality or their thefts. So friends, in the Old Testament, when the children of Israel started worshiping idols and images, did things go better or worse for them? It went worse. In the New Testament, when God's people, his Israel of faith, started erecting images in their churches, do you think things are going to go better or worse? Again, it's worse. God's consistent. And Christians are invaded just like Israel was invaded when they had images. Only the prophecy here says that the Christians wouldn't change anyway. The images are still there. However, God uses it for good. He does promise to use all things for good. Because you see, up in the top, you see the Germanic tribes there. There's a monk up there by the name of Martin Luther. Nails his 95 theses or statements to the Wittenberg chapel door 500 years ago. And why didn't the papacy send an army up there and take him out? Because there were a couple of German princes and their small armies that were supporting him, which meant they would have to send a larger army up there. But the Turks were pushing from the south, and they couldn't afford a civil war up there in Germany when they needed everybody down there fighting against the Turks. Martin Luther saw this happen a couple of times and realized, and he actually said his greatest defender was the Sultan of Turkey. In Daniel 11, it said when people would do great exploits for God during this time period, he would give them a little help. That little help was the push of the Turks from the south, gave breathing room to the Reformation so that they could translate the Bible into common languages and teach righteousness by faith again. God uses everything for good. So we have these three conflicts. We have the appointed time, the former, the latter. The first one's the Crusades, the last one's the time of the end. But the appointed time, by saying appointed time, tells you that there are time prophecies related to this one. Now, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of this. And here we go. We have this brief overview. We have the appointed time from 1360 to 1843-44. That's the time of the Turks. How do we have a Bible prophecy on this? And Daniel 11 tells us what to expect. Daniel 12 gives us the time applications to it. And it tells us from the abomination of desolations until a blessing, there's going to be a 1290 and a 1335. Well, in Daniel, there are two abominations of desolation. The first one is the fall of Jerusalem in Daniel 9:27. You go, fall of Jerusalem, 70 AD. You come 1290 years and it brings you to John Wycliffe, the beginning of the Reformation at the time of the Ottoman Empire. 1335 brings you to John Huss, the first practicing reformer. Wycliffe is the theoretician of the Reformation, Huss the first practicing reformer. And so from 1360 to 1405, we have the beginnings of the Reformation, and Daniel 11 describes both the Ottomans and the Reformation in 29 to 39 at the appointed time. Between 1360 and 1405, the Ottoman Empire is rapidly gaining in power, and by 1453, they conquer Constantinople. So both the Reformation and the Ottomans are climbing during that introductory period. They're both strong throughout, and then let's back up. In verse 31 of Daniel 11, it says the abomination of desolation is when the papacy gets the force of arms. There's your second one. So you start from that one, and they got the force of arms from Clovis, the French king, in 508. Go 1290 years, it brings you to 1798, when they lost their political power to be able to persecute people. Hey, would that be good news? Yeah. If you were waiting in line to be burned at the stake, it sure would be. You come 1335, it brings you to 1843-44, just after the Ottoman Empire goes down, and during this time period of 1798 to 1844, the Reformation starts teaching counter-Reformation teachings, and the Reformation begins to fall apart. And so from 1360 to 1844, you have the rise and fall of both the Ottoman Empire and the Reformation. And so anything before 1360 is the former conflict. Anything after 1843-44 is the latter. And by putting the time bookends on the Ottoman Empire and the Reformation, it's giving us the placement of all three. It's amazing prophecy. And I just wish I had an hour to go through it with you. But that's what I've got. Also, the king of the north and king of the south are similar in their deadly wound or their power curves. Let me show you something. Here's the papal power curve. From 538 to 1798, they're 1260 years. They lose their power to Berthier, Napoleon's general, in 1798, 1929. Mussolini signs a concordat, and they again have church and state power, and they begin to rise in power. And John Paul and others and Francis have just taken them up. According to prophecy, the way I understand it, they will eventually hit their peak of power of all time just before the coming of Jesus Christ. But I wanted to see what the Ottoman Empire or the Muslim empires look like. And the first one, Arab Islam, and then as they weaken, the Crusades hit them. Then the Ottoman Empire comes in. Then they go down in 1840, 1948. We begin to have a resurgence of Islam. Why? Israel is declared as a nation, and they were going to push Israel into the sea the first day. That hasn't worked yet for them. However, by having a common enemy, they didn't fight with each other quite so much, and that strengthened them some. Also, they got oil money, and they discovered terrorism. And with that combination, you recognize that they are one of the greatest threats to the world today, as far as radical Islam is. And so we enter the time of the third conflict. Could this kind of a conflict actually happen? Well, it already is, and it would take something really major to avoid it. Let me illustrate something here. Back in 2011, I wrote my first book, and it was on Daniel 11. The first thing that I was saying to be watching for as we went forward, that radical Islam would attack and anger papal-led Christianity so much that the papacy would call for war against radical Islam. And then radical Islam would be overthrown and destroyed. Number 1 and number 2 are already happening. Number 3 is in the process. This isn't following what's going on in the news. This is preceding what's going on in the news. Daniel is accurate. And this understanding has been solid all the way along. Let me give you a little idea of part of the reason. If you understand what's going on in the Muslim world today, we have Sunni Muslims. Not all Muslims are the same, just like all Christians aren't the same. We have lots of different groups of Christians, right? Same kind of idea here. But the Sunnis, Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, lots of different groups, Boko Haram, are Sunni. And here's what they are believing about their end-time views. And that is that there will be a war in Syria, except there already is one, right? And they're very involved in it. And in this war in Syria, they believe they will almost be wiped out. God will help them come back. And then, when they come back, Jesus will join with them. He will help Christians convert and become Muslim. And then everybody who disagrees will be put to death. They will establish the world headquarters or caliphate capital in the city of Al-Quds. And Jesus himself will kill the Dajjal, Antichrist-type character somewhere in Syria or Jerusalem area, in the Middle East. Well, that's the Sunni version. The Shiite version is quite similar. There will be a war in Syria. They will be involved in it. And the 12th Imam, a Messiah-type figure, will come on the scene. And he will lead them to victory. Jesus himself will join in so that he can convert Christians so that they can become Muslim. They will kill everybody who disagrees. And they will set up the caliphate capital in Al-Quds. Very similar with a twist. And so, what city is caught in the middle in Daniel 11? Jerusalem is, right? Guess what Al-Quds is? It's the Arabic name for Jerusalem. And so, they want to set up the capital of all Islam in Jerusalem, not in Mecca. Do you think that could cause a problem in our world today? Let's see. The Christians want Jerusalem. The Jews want Jerusalem. The Muslims want Jerusalem. What city is caught in the middle in the geopolitical religious conflict? Nothing comes close to Jerusalem in this conflict. Daniel never misses. Then we have prophecies of Mary and predicting an Islamic Antichrist. It's in the book Thunder of Justice. Now, I don't really believe these are from Mary. One of the major reasons would be that these were prophecies that were supposed to happen right around the year 2000, and they didn't. Almost all of them failed. So I don't believe they're legit to start out with. But this is a very interesting one, and all it is a tweaking of Daniel 11. But it does so in a very dangerous way. Take a look. There will be a World War III, and it will be started by a man who wears the turban of the faith, a Muslim. Yet there will be a more powerful one to rise in Syria. Oh, there's been around 400 or 1,000 or more people in the last few years killed in that war in Syria. It's a serious battle. Yet there is a more powerful one to rise in Syria. When this one has accomplished his work, he will cause destruction and pain and great persecution. The red will flow into the sea. There will be nothing to eat. The Antichrist is going to arise from the Mohammedan race, a Muslim. Catch that point. She's saying that the Antichrist is a Muslim. If you have a holy war, you have to have both sides thinking the other sides are the devil. The radical Muslims are already thinking the Christians are the devil. Now you have Mary saying, oops, hey, the Antichrist is a Muslim, so both sides have permission to act like the devil to kill each other when you get to that idea. Remember, don't join either side. Continues. He's going to have a turban. The people will call it the Eye of Satan. He will be young, wearing a long robe. That's 12th Imam sounding phrases. He will be very intelligent and well equipped for nuclear war. Worse than Hitler, connected with communists, fire rockets at us, and some will hit New York City. So, there are aspects of this one that have come true, but like I said, it's just a twist on Daniel 11, and, well, Daniel 11 has been there a long time. God had put it there to start with. However, in today's world, many evangelicals and talk show hosts are actually saying that the Antichrist is a Muslim. Protestants used to say it was papal-led Christianity. Yes, they really did say that in the past. But now, Wally Chubat, Glenn Beck, Joel Richardson, Joel Rosenberg, Tim LaHaye, and others have all said in one way or another that Islam would be the Antichrist, or a Muslim would be the Antichrist. So we have in Daniel 11:40-43 in this final conflict that we have Islam divided three ways. Let's take a look at them. First, Edom, Moab, and Ammon escaped. That's western Jordan, as I mentioned before. Second, we have Egypt and many countries overthrown. So there's going to be a large group of Muslim nations that are overthrown in this third conflict, relatively large, Egypt and many countries. And number three, Libya and Ethiopia follow after the king of the north. And in the parallel statement in Revelation chapter 13, it says, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. Hey, if that's true, there can't be radical Islam anymore, can there? Because they're definitely not following. So we have this three-way split. We're going to focus on number 2 and number 3. We're going to finish with part 1, the part that escapes, because it's the good news. Now, if we take a look at the maps again, we see the ancient borders. Libya took in North Africa, Egypt's up there in the northeast corner of Africa, and Ethiopia is taking that whole section below Egypt. And so, remember, everything is both geopolitical and spiritual? So it says Egypt and many countries will be overthrown. Well, Egypt is the birthplace of modern radical Islam. In the 1920s, the Muslim Brotherhood came from there. All right? So Egypt, geopolitically, I believe it will radicalize and be overthrown. Some people say maybe that's already fulfilled when the Muslim Brotherhood fell. I'm not so sure about that. It might be, but I think there's probably more coming. So we have Egypt and many countries going down, but spiritually, the religious aspect of it is radical Islam all over the world goes down. Moderate Islam, Libya and Ethiopia, these are places that have been trying to get rid of, they're having trouble with radical Islam, but they're trying to get rid of it. These are countries that would logically follow the king of the north in a full-scale holy war. And when I go to mosque, and I do quite often when I start a seminar in some city, I'll drop in on the mosque and invite people from the mosque to come to my seminar. And what I find is in almost all mosques, most of the people there hate radical Islam. And if you notice, the U.S. forces that have been helping in the attack on Mosul, they haven't been leading the attack so much as they've been training. And that's pushing the Islamic State back out of areas of Iraq. It's Muslims moderate Muslims, so-called at least, that are fighting against the Islamic State. So you already have large groups of Muslims joining papal-led Christianity in the U.S. in the fight against radical Islam. Well, you take modern boundaries, and if you have Egypt and many countries go down with Libya and Ethiopia territories following the King of the North, well, you're probably going to have some major countries off there to the east that go down. You have Saudi Arabia out there, Iraq, Iran, many options out there that get many. So it could be pretty radical. And if you have that much disturbance in the Middle East, China and Europe are in trouble for their oil supply. So the economy in the world will probably be shaken as well. How might this start? Well, there are several ways it could happen. Israel and Iran could get into it. They've always been on the verge of that. You could have radical Islam just have some major events like September 11, that's kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back. You could have a whole variety of ways, but the way that's done the most damage in recent years and really got things moving was when the caliphate was declared by the Islamic State. You see, when we had the Arab caliphates, we had the first conflict. When we had the Ottoman caliphates, we had the second conflict. And when we had the Islamic State caliphate called again, we finally had a functioning caliphate again, and everything started to happen as described in the whirlwind. Let's take a look. The caliphate was declared right at the end of June, and the report came out on it July 1. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the self-proclaimed leader of the Islamic State stretching across Iraq and Syria, has vowed to lead the conquest of Rome as he called on Muslims to immigrate to his new land to fight under its banner around the globe. I do want you to notice something there. What was it he was going to have a conquest of? Rome. Do you know what the name of their terror magazine is today? Romalia, their name for Rome. And so when the caliphate is declared, they take direct aim at Rome, and Daniel says the king of the south will push against the king of the north. In the next 5.5 weeks, the king of the south, or the Islamic State, pushes across Iraq and Syria, conquering huge territories, killing Christians, Yazidis, and Muslims. Actually, more Muslims than anything else. And the Pope had it, and he came out with this statement. Pope Francis appealed to world leaders on Thursday to help end the crisis in northern Iraq after a sweeping advance by radical Islamic State militants forced thousands of residents of Iraq's biggest Christian town to flee their homes. His Holiness addresses an urgent appeal to the international community to take action to end the humanitarian tragedy now underway. He's calling for action, and this was military action. August 7, 2014, I believe the whirlwind began, because in Daniel 11, it's when the king of the north calls for the military. Just like the Crusades were called by the Pope, so was the conflict against the Islamic State. The next day, Obama comes out and says the United States, or America, is coming to help. Within 36 hours of the papal call to action, the United States was bombing the Islamic State. Now, I want you to notice that these articles are all in date order. Not going to talk very much about terrorism. You've already known that. I'm talking about what I believe is the really important stuff that most people have been ignoring. A couple of days afterwards, now 4 days after the papal call for action, some in the media were saying, oh, the Pope was probably just calling for humanitarian action. He wouldn't be calling for war. He's the man of peace. So out come his ambassadors to make sure the world knows, no, he wanted military action. Referring to military action, Archbishop Giorgio Lingua, the Vatican's nuncio to Iraq, told Vatican Radio this is something that had to be done, otherwise the Islamic State could not be stopped. Such a call is virtually unprecedented for a papal envoy in modern times. You've got to go back to the Ottoman Empire to get this kind of stuff. But our age is an extraordinary one, and the Islamic State has no interest in the bargaining table. Instead, the Islamic State is bent on genocide and barbarism, ruthlessly exterminating anyone who opposes them. Then, August 13,
Less than a week after the Pope calls for action, the Holy See's ambassador to the United States, this is the Pope's ambassador to the United Nations, Silvano Tomasi, this weekend supported U.S. airstrikes aimed at halting the advance of Sunni Islamic State militants, calling for intervention now before it's too late. While the Vatican vocally disapproved of the U.S.-led campaign in Iraq in 2003 and the 2013 plan for airstrikes on Syria, fearing both might make the situation worse for Christians on the ground, fears of ethnic cleansing by Islamists has forced a policy change. In Daniel 11, it says it's the king of the south pushing against the king of the north that triggers the king of the north to come out with military action. What does this article admit? Well, it's because the Islamic State is pushing so hard that they had to come back and call for military action. I want you to notice the sequence is exactly the same as described in Daniel 11. It's the same as what we put in our book because Daniel never misses. It's not because we're so smart. We're just actually following what it says and how it says it. And it's been paying off well. Then the Islamic State began the film productions of people having their heads cut off and other atrocities and post them on YouTube for the world to watch because they're trying to get the world mad to come against them and fight. Former Israeli President Shimon Peres asked Pope Francis to head a parallel United Nations called the United Religions to counter religious extremism in the world today. The world was really frustrated with the Islamic State in the fall of 2014. Look what he says. So given that the United Nations has run its course, what we need is an organization of united religions, Mr. Perez said, as the best way to counteract these terrorists who kill in the name of their faith. What we need is an unquestionable moral authority who says out loud, no, God doesn't want this and doesn't allow it, he added. The world wants to make the Pope the one that says you don't kill in the name of your religion. At the Crusades and the Inquisition, they were responsible for the death of millions of people who differed with them. And you want to put them as the one that says don't kill in the name of your religion? That's asking the fox to guard the hen house. But they'd be more than willing to guard it. The Islamic State then comes out and calls for an attack on the papacy. What has been declared by the self-declared Islamic State is clear. They want to kill the Pope. The threats against the Pope are credible. What is the name of their terror magazine? I mentioned it a bit ago, Romolia. Not necessarily going to recommend you read that magazine. It's an English language magazine, but if you do, you could find yourself on a watch list. Just a heads up. I occasionally watch it. I figure I'm already on the watch list. I've had FBI, Homeland Security, military intelligence, and State Department people attend my seminars and talk to me, so I've got a feeling they might know something about me. I was going through the Boise airport, and there was a guy that said, oh, you guys have videos, is the TSA guy. And I said, yeah, have you watched them on our website? He says, no, I've been in your luggage. And he knew who I was. So anyway, it gets interesting. It went on to say the Pope had made himself a target by speaking out against the human rights abuses committed against Christians in Syria and Iraq, as well as by his approval of attempts by the U.S. to try and roll back ISIL, the Islamic State. And so, the Islamic State wants to assassinate the Pope. In their terror magazine, they have pictures of Rome with the Vatican with the black flag flying over it. It's pretty clear there is an assault intended against the Pope. If the Pope was ever assassinated, we would be in holy war so fast it would set your head spinning. Because the media really likes the Pope. And it would just tip everything over the edge, I believe. Jihadi John said to Obama, the dog of Rome, today we are slaughtering the soldiers of Bashar, and tomorrow we'll be slaughtering your soldiers, and with Allah's permission, we will break this final and last crusade, and the Islamic State will soon, like your puppet David Cameron said, begin to slaughter your people on your streets. He calls the U.S. the dog of Rome. The Pope says bite, and within 36 hours, the United States is biting with bombs and missiles. So yeah, the United States is the enforcer, just like we saw in Revelation chapter 13. If you are waiting for prophecy to be fulfilled before you wake up, folks, you've slept too long. It's already happening. It's time to be awake, preparing to meet Jesus Christ. Pope Francis said that equating Islam with violence was wrong and called on Muslim leaders to issue a global condemnation of terrorism to help dispel the stereotype. You just can't say that all Muslims are terrorists, just as you can't say that all Christians are fundamentalists. We have our share of them fundamentalists. All religions have these little groups. Oh, so he's called for the destruction, military action against the Muslim fundamentalist. But he's saying, we have our own fundamentalists. We all have these problem groups. What's a fundamentalist, Christian fundamentalist? One who goes by what the Bible says. What's a Muslim fundamentalist? One who goes by what the Quran says. Do you know what the papacy called Christian fundamentalists back during the Inquisition? Simple word, heretics, and they burned them at the stake. And he just said, there are some Christian fundamentalists. We all have these problem groups. He's already going after the Muslim fundamentalist. According to the prophecy, after taking out Islam fundamentalist, he goes after Christians that are following the Bible. And you can see it coming if you know the prophecy, and if you're not paying attention to the prophecy, you're going to be sound asleep. This is why you need to make sure your friends are watching this stuff. Then in Paris, you might remember the Charlie Hebdo incident, when a magazine printed some cartoons about Muhammad, and a couple of ISIS guys show up and they end up killing part of the staff of the Charlie Hebdo magazine, and then there's a shootout in a Jewish deli and 17 people die. Remember that one? Within 48 hours of the end of that episode, a historic crowd of more than 1 million people, including more than 40 world leaders, jammed the streets on Sunday, that's of Paris. Leaders often at odds, such as Ukrainian president and Russian foreign minister, Israeli Netanyahu and Palestinian Mahmoud Abbas. Notice when the media gets into something, people who are arguing with each other suddenly come on the same page. It can happen quickly. It can leave your head spinning. They were there demonstrating against terrorism and what happened there. So most of you have heard of what happened to 17 people in Paris, the Charlie Hebdo incident. However, very few people are aware of the other terrorist attack that happened at that time, where over 2,000 people were killed. Isn't that amazing? We all heard about the 17, but we missed the 2,000. Here's the story. Came out in the BBC. Nigeria says the number of people who lost their lives in an assault by Boko Haram militants on the town of Baga last week was no more than 150. The defense ministry said the figure included many of the terrorists who had attacked the town in Borno State and faced resistance by troops. Local officials earlier estimated the number of deaths as many as 2,000. Nigeria has often been accused of underestimating casualty figures to downplay the threat of Boko Haram. By the time dust settled, the number 2,000 plus was probably the accurate number. Why didn't you know about it? Number one, there were no pictures. There was no video. Number two, they're just African Christians. And that gets overlooked all the time because the media doesn't care. Charlie Hebdo, on the other hand, those were secular media guys, and the media cares about them. The media is exceedingly slanted in our world today. And because of that attack, the president of Nigeria ran out of luck and was voted out of office. His name? Goodluck Jonathan. And now they have a new president. 21 Coptic Christians were beheaded by ISIS on the beaches of Libya. As soon as they were done, one of the leaders points a bloody finger straight north and says, "We're coming after the nation of the cross," just 100 and some miles away from Italy. The next day, Franklin Graham tweets this: "Where is the universal condemnation by Muslim leaders around the world? We'd better take this warning seriously, as these acts of terror will only spread throughout Europe and the United States. The storm is coming." But according to the Bible, the storm actually started August 7, 2014, the whirlwind, and things are just rapidly happening. In an unusually blunt endorsement of military action, the Vatican's top diplomat at the United Nations in Geneva has called for a coordinated international force to stop the so-called Islamic State in Syria and Iraq. He said the joint statement originated with Russia, which traditionally sees itself as a protector of Orthodox Christians in the Middle East. So in March of 2015, the Vatican's ambassador to the United Nations is still pushing for even more military action. And this time, notice it's a joint statement between Russia and the Vatican. And Putin, the leader of Russia, considers himself the protector of Orthodox Christianity. And so you have Orthodox Christianity and Putin swinging in with the Pope, papal-led Christianity in opposition to Islam. And the world was shocked a few months later when Russia sent troops and planes into Syria. But that was clearly stated way back in March, that was going to be happening. So if you're paying attention to prophecy, you don't have to have a lot of surprises. You can see it coming. You can ignore the things that aren't matching prophecy and focus on those things that are, and you can stay ahead of the game. This is an interesting article describing what a prophetic whirlwind could look like from the New York Post. By the way, all these things are the references and everything are in our book. I just don't have time to read the reference. They're on the slide, but if you want all the references, you can get a book from us. These are unprecedented developments, veering so far from the norm and happening so fast that consequences are piling up faster than they can be comprehended. Alliances built over decades are shattered in a relative flash, inviting aggression and endless conflict. The toxic brew of Islamic fanaticism and nuclear proliferation could ignite a world conflagration. Wow, that describes our whirlwind. And what about Pope Francis? Is he gaining or losing power during this time period? He's gaining, just like you would expect. Whenever Islam comes up in history, the Pope gains power. But shrewdly, methodically, and with a showman's flair, the soft-spoken 78-year-old Argentinian Jesuit priest named Pope Francis showed Thursday that he is running to become president of the planet. And they were ready to endorse him. And Revelation says, and all the world follows him in the system. Then we had the immigration crisis. I don't think this wave can stop, said Sonia Licht of the International Center for Democratic Transition. The global north must be prepared that the global south is on the move, the entire global south. This is not just a problem for Europe, but for the whole world. So we have the immigration crisis. Early 2015, the doors of Europe were wide open to the immigrants. By the end of 2015, oh man, they were trying to figure out how to put up fences and all kinds of things and send them back home. And if you haven't noticed the political turmoil in Europe ever since, because the anti-immigrations, anti-Islam parties have been gaining in power, and the other parties that have been in power for a long time periods have been losing power. It is a different world in Europe than it was in the summer of 2015. Then President Trump wins the election. Now, the article is called "Horror and Fear Strikes the Muslim World as Trump Wins After Months of Anti-Islamic Rhetoric." This is quoting from some moderate Muslims who said that Trump's win would be seen as a power play for terrorists across the globe. When the United States uses hard power, extremists gain a momentum, he said. Those who will be the happiest when Trump wins are ISIS. Oh. Why? Well, if they see the U.S. coming as a crusader nation, they can say, hey, everybody, look, we're about to be wiped out. It's time. Remember our viewpoint? We almost get wiped out in Syria, and then everybody's got to pile in, and then we'll win all over the world. This is a recruiting tool to get radicalized Muslims to step forward and put it all in at this time. And so what you have is likely to be a ramping up of even more radical Islamic terrorism. Then in his inauguration speech, President Trump said the following: "We will reinforce old alliances and form new ones, and unite the civilized world against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth." Islam would push against the King of the North. The King of the North would come out and call for military action and get it. and then radical Islam will be destroyed. Can you not see those things happening in order as predicted? President Trump says he wants to move the embassy, the American embassy to Israel, to Jerusalem. It's in Tel Aviv now. Palestinian officials said the embassy's relocation would kill off any prospect for peace. Where do the Muslims want to see the caliphate headquarters? In Jerusalem. I don't want to see a U.S. embassy to Israel there. Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, said, I want to make it unequivocally clear the U.S. embassy should be here in Jerusalem. Wow. I don't know what President Trump will do. And I don't know if he's going to stay in office all the way through his term either. It's quite volatile. But he is tracking down the very track that Daniel 11 says to watch for. And if he wants to sort out who the radicals are, all he has to do is put the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, and the radicals will go crazy trying to get rid of it, and it kind of identifies who to wipe out. I don't know if that's what he's got in mind, but it would work as such. Then look at his first world trip, foreign trip. He goes to Saudi Arabia, Israel, Vatican. Saudi Arabia is a leader in the Muslim world, the king of the south. Then he goes to Israel, and then he goes to the Vatican to meet with the Pope, the three primary players of Daniel 11. Wow! Tell me this isn't stuff about today's world. Everything is there. Here's what it says. The visit to Saudi Arabia, Trump said, will include a truly historic gathering in Saudi Arabia with leaders from all across the Muslim world. We will begin to reconstruct a new foundation of cooperation and support with our Muslim allies to combat extremism and terrorism and violence. And so we have the Islamic State that has been leading out in this stuff. They may go down, but if they go down, Erdogan in Turkey wants to set up the caliphate. The Iranians want to set up the caliphate. The Muslim Brotherhood wants to set up the caliphate. And Al-Qaeda wants to set up the caliphate. So we still have plenty of radical Islam to deal with all over this world. And as far as Iran goes, notice this one. Over the years, we've seen photographs of North Korean and Iranian officials in each other's countries, and we've seen all kinds of common hardware. Whatever Iran knows, North Korea knows. What North Korea knows, Iran knows. So just think about the technology North Korea has been releasing and know that Iran's got to tap right into that. So it can get really dicey here. But I need to get to the good news to end with. And that's those who escape, Edom, Moab, and Ammon. These shall escape from his hand, Edom, Moab, and Ammon. 12:1 says, and at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. Notice, escape and delivered are both underlined. The reason, they're the same word in Hebrew. There's some kind of a linguistic tie here. But when you compare Daniel and Revelation, that tie gets better because notice, 12:1 is about the people delivered are those in the book. We find the book in Revelation as well. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life when they see the beast. Everybody follows the beast, papal-led Christianity at the end, except those in the Lamb's book of life. Edom, Moab, and Ammon, they're not overthrown, and they don't follow the king of the north. If they don't follow the king of the north, they have to be in the Lamb's book of life. That's why it's the same word in Hebrew to tell you there's a link. What am I saying? I'm saying I'm expecting a Muslim group to take a stand for Jesus in the Bible. And let's keep going. And Thessalonians, and they shall not escape, but you, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. How shall we escape? Hebrews 2:3. If we neglect so great a salvation, which at first began to be spoken by the Lord and was confirmed to us by those who heard him, you escape by trusting in Jesus. Take a look at Amos 9. On that day I will raise up the tabernacle of David, which has fallen down, and repair its damages, and rebuild it as in the days of old, that they may possess the remnant of Edom and all the Gentiles who are called by my name. There's a remnant of Edom. A remnant is often a good thing. When Jesus, the Davidic king, reestablishes the Davidic kingdom, Edom is included in it. Take a look at this map. The Davidic kingdom included Edom, Moab, and Ammon, and Edom, Moab, and Ammon escape and are delivered, are a part of God's people. Joel 2:28. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams. Your young men shall see visions before the great and awesome day of the Lord. And it shall come to pass that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be deliverance. It says that just before the coming of Jesus, there's going to be a lot of dreams and visions going on. And all over the Muslim world, there are dreams and visions happening. And Muslims are seeing ease of the righteous one, Jesus Christ. And he tells them they should be trusting in him as their Savior. He's coming as their King and their Judge. And they should be following the Bible, called the book. I've met many, many Muslims who have had dreams and visions that led them to trust in Jesus Christ. Let's see. The Islamic conflict is just what is predicted in prophecy. God is pouring out dreams and visions just as he promised just before the coming of Jesus Christ. Folks, this should be a real big wake-up call to get ready to meet Jesus Christ. So what's a real Christian supposed to do? Well, should I go join the radical Islam and fight against the Pope? No. Should I go join papal-led Christianity to fight against radical Islam? No, because then I'm just a pawn in papal-led Christianity's hands. So what should I do? I should remember this is not my war. My war, your war, if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, is the trust in Jesus and the Bible. And he's going to have a group of Muslims trusting in Jesus and the Bible that are now, you could call them Christians, but they don't like the term because of the history of the Crusades and things. They prefer a follower of Jesus and a follower of the book. There's going to be a group of Christians that are following Jesus and the Bible, and both the radical Muslims and the Christians, by and large, papal-led Christianity, are going to hate them, and they're going to get caught where? Right in the middle, just like Jerusalem. And you, if you're a true follower of Jesus, have got to have the courage to love both sides. And when you're hated, you've got to return love for hate. There's your challenge, and by knowing the prophecy, it gives you your marching orders. You take the stand in the middle. What a time to be alive. And Daniel 11 takes an interesting twist. From here on, it leaves the geopolitical and primarily moves into religious, spiritual stuff. And it goes after one counterfeit teaching after another, the abominations of papal-led Christianity. And I encourage you, hang on in here as we find out what happens next. And it's the greatest evangelistic opportunity of all time. Our next presentation is Tidings from the East and the Mark of the Beast. Man, you want to be a part of this one as well. Make sure you're trusting in Jesus. It's an exciting time to be alive.